Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie. And in this video, I'm going to be looking at the week starting on Monday, August the 5th, 2024. Now, let me start off by giving you an idea about the structure of this video. I'm going to begin by just looking at the main events this week. I'm just going to go through them Monday through to Sunday. Well, in fact, I don't think I say much on Sunday, but I'm just going to do a day-by-day account of the main events. And then I'm going to look at my theme. And my theme for this video is Venus in Virgo. I'm just going to consider what it might mean to have Venus in Virgo in one's chart. And I'm going to give some examples of people who have this placement. And as always, it's kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think also I need to make it clear that this selection is simply the collection of charts that I'm looking at that perhaps I'm interested in. In fact, some of these charts I'm not interested in at all, but they're the charts I have at my disposal. So this sample of people with Venus in Virgo is going to be somewhat biased. So you have to be careful about that when thinking about generalizing it to the wider population of people with Venus in Virgo. And having done that, I'm going to look at the I Ching for this week. That means that I cast the I Ching and I ask what is the week going to be like for people watching the I Ching section of this video. So if you don't watch the I Ching section of this video, the reading doesn't apply to you and you needn't worry about it. Okay, so before looking at what's happening day by day this week, I just want to remind you that if you like this video, I would really appreciate it if you were to subscribe. And assuming you're not already subscribed, and of course, if you're already subscribed and you like the video, I'd be really happy if you were to like the video. I think it's quite simple to like the video. Liking and subscribing, these are quite simple actions that don't cost you anything, but they do make a big difference to my channel. Okay, so let's start off by looking at what's happening this week and looking at the starting positions. So here we have top right, we've got a few people, by the way, who've got Venus in Virgo. We've got Meghan, our perennial favourite, and we've got Gavin Newsom. We've got Martha Stewart. Martha Stewart, I don't really know much about her. She did go to prison, didn't she? But I think she's particularly famous for advice on decoration and how to present meals and so on. Then we've got the ugly or the bad is Mohamed Atta, who was the ringleader of the 9/11 plot. At least I think he was the ringleader of the 9/11 plot. I mean, I know there's controversy about that. And we've got Kim Kardashian. And the good is Oscar Romero, who was fairly recently canonized. He was actually canonized on his Chiron return, his second Chiron return. I did a video about him. Okay, so let's look at what the planets are doing right at the beginning of the week. So I've set this chart for the moment the week starts, New York time. So there we have Venus just moving into Virgo. That is a big change. Sunday, or right at the end of last week, the beginning of this week, we've got Venus moving from Leo into Virgo, and the Leo emphasis starts to fade. Well, I mean, we've still got the Sun and the Moon in Leo, and Leo isn't going to go away anytime soon because Mercury will go retrograde, go back into Leo. So we're not done with Leo, but right now Venus has moved out of Leo into Virgo, and so what that means is that in terms of how people relate to each other in a general sense, with Venus moving into Virgo. Perhaps there's a certain sense in which people are more into details, asking themselves, what can they benefit? How can they benefit from this particular relationship? How is it going to help me? Venus in Leo was, it might have just been enough to get appreciation, to feel good about yourself when you're being with people, thinking perhaps about the show of a relationship. But Venus in Virgo is perhaps starting to ask questions about what about the details? What are the financial implications? Who's going to win? Who's going to lose? And yeah, details can matter. I don't think I need to say too much about Venus in Virgo right now, because in a few minutes' time I'm going to be going into Venus in Virgo in detail. Now, another thing happens on Monday, and that is Mercury going retrograde. Now, this Mercury retrograde goes retrograde for 3 weeks, and Mercury's in Virgo, sure, that's nice, but it doesn't stay in Virgo for that long. And with that Mercury retrograde on Monday, we have to, I think, compare it with the fact that we've got a full moon, or we had a full moon on Sunday. So what's happened is, and this may have relevance to Monday, we've got Mercury retrograde immediately following a full moon. And so when you've got this happening, or when you've got a lunation and Mercury changing direction very close to each other, this can create added turmoil, and it certainly can create turmoil in the markets. For example, the markets were heavily down on last Friday, what would that be, Friday the 2nd. And I think that the markets may be picking up on the fact that Mercury is coming to a standstill. You've got a full moon coming up, and I'm making this video on Saturday morning, so I don't know what the markets are going to be doing on Monday, but it will certainly be very interesting to see. I don't want to say what I think they're going to be doing on Monday, because this is not a financial channel, and one has to be careful about money and making financial forecasts. So, this channel is for entertainment purposes only. But it will be interesting to see what happens on Monday with Mercury going retrograde just after a full moon. Then on Tuesday we have the Sun sesquiquadrate Neptune. Sun sesquiquadrate Neptune may just add to the confusion. It's the Sun is very much how we're trying to express ourselves. And when it's 135 degrees from Neptune, it just may be a little confused. We don't really know how to express ourselves. Remember, 135 degrees, that is 3/8 of a circle. There is a certain tension there. And people may not entirely know what they want to do, or they may be motivated by plain fantasy, or they're trying to find some fantasy. That's because Mars is also on Tuesday. We've got Mars quintile Neptune. So Mars quintile Neptune can be about, Mars quintile Neptune. It's what we're trying to create. And so some people may feel they need to make a special effort to create a world of make-believe and fantasy. That's what they're put where the effort goes into. And people may be attracted to things that are a bit, underhand. There's always a sense of sleaze, in my opinion, when Mars makes a quintile to Neptune. So some people may actually be making a deliberate effort to be sleazy. There's certainly the attraction to criminality, the attraction to, drug culture and whatever. That's not healthy, but people want to give that impression. And that might be just how, for some people, Mars quintile Neptune might work. Then on Wednesday, we have got Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto. So Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto is, I think, quite a strong aspect. And when you've got Jupiter Pluto sesquiquadrate, you may feel a great need to improve things, improve yourself. Jupiter is not quite happy where it is. It's not quite good enough. And Pluto is urging Jupiter on. And so it's perhaps a time to look at what we're doing, what we've achieved, what we've not achieved, and perhaps to up the pace. That might just be something that we have to do. Also, we have Sun sextile Jupiter. Sun sextile Jupiter is an entirely fortunate aspect, I would have said. Jupiter's a fortunate planet. Sun sextile Jupiter is a time we can really get things moving, and we can be optimistic, and we can really make things happen. And so that's happening on Wednesday, along with Jupiter sesquiquadrate Pluto and Sun sextile Jupiter. So in a way, Jupiter is doubly affected by the Sun on Wednesday midweek, by the Sun sextile and by the Pluto sesquiquadrate. So Wednesday might be a time to really push things and to sort of make things happen. Then another good aspect takes place on August the 8th, which is a Thursday. We've got Mercury conjunct Venus. Mercury-Venus conjunctions are great in most cases because they're very creative. Mercury is about our mind and our intellect, and Venus is perhaps how we present our mind and our intellect to other people. And it can be about how we create, sometimes before an audience, not always before an audience. It can just be about creating something wonderful. Remembering that Venus is not just about other people, it's about art, it's about aesthetics. And so if you want to do something of artistic or creative value, then Thursday does look a good day. And I suppose it might also feed into the fact that, Wednesday you've got Sun sextile Jupiter. Thursday you've got Mercury conjunct Venus. So Wednesday, Thursday may be the time to really make things happen. That seems to be quite a nice time during the week. Of course, I understand that Mercury is retrograde, and with Mercury retrograde we might have a certain amount of indecision there. But I don't think that should be a big problem. Remember with Mercury retrograde, Mercury does go retrograde a lot. And, sometimes I think that Mercury retrograde only affects people who are into astrology. If you're not into astrology, you're not impacted by it. I mean, that's not strictly speaking true, but that is something to bear in mind. By the way, talking about Mercury retrograde, the October the 19th, 1987 crash happened just after Mercury went retrograde. So I think that weekend of the 17th and the 18th, 1987, Mercury was going retrograde. It went stationary retrograde, and then the big crash happened on Monday. Just pointing it out. And after Thursday, I don't think there's a great deal going on, at least not in terms of the astrological aspects that I can see on, I think it's Saturday, over the weekend. Next weekend we've got Sun quincunx Saturn. Okay, it might be a bit of a downer, Sun quincunx Saturn, Sun being 150 degrees from Saturn. Maybe, but we feel there's something holding us up, something perhaps we need to be a little more disciplined in terms of how we're going about expressing ourselves, but I don't think it's a particularly big deal. So those are the events over the week, starting on Monday, August the 5th. And now I just want to say a little bit about Venus in Virgo. And as is my custom, I will start by looking at Venus in Virgo in a theoretical way. So Venus is the planet of relationships. It's the planet of money. It's the planet of aesthetics. What looks beautiful, what looks ugly. That's what Venus is about. And Venus moving into Virgo, or Venus in Virgo, is not the best. It's not the best sign for Venus to be in. And, that is because Venus is exalted in Pisces. Venus works really well in Pisces. It's a sense. Pisces is a sign that's very sensitive. It can go with the flow. It's also very creative. So Pisces is a great place for Venus to be in. And so as Venus is exalted in Pisces, it is by definition fallen in Virgo. And I think that makes sense, doesn't it? Because Venus is an emotional sign, an emotional planet. It's about relating. It's about letting go a little. But Virgo is just simply too focused on detail. Venus can never let go in Virgo. And, I suppose if you think about relationships, people say, of course, this is sort of a fantasy idea of relationships, but relationships is all about just letting go, accepting the other person for who they are. Isn't love supposed to be unconditional and just total acceptance? Yet Venus in Virgo finds it difficult to let go. And Venus in Virgo can be a little bit calculating. The other person might be in a sort of romantic stupor, but Venus in Virgo is always calculating what is going on. And Venus in Virgo might also point things out at some moment of sort of, romantic bliss and ecstasy. Venus in Virgo will just notice something. A hair out of place, for example. I mean, that's a bit of an exaggeration. But Venus in Virgo will be also thinking ahead. Is this the right thing to do? And with Venus in Virgo, there is a transactional element to Venus in Virgo. How will this relationship be of benefit? How could it hurt? So Venus in Virgo is always calculating. And I hope I don't offend anyone here, but there is potentially a connection between Venus and Virgo and prostitution. Now, that might not seem obvious. Venus in Virgo is supposed to be very pure, but at the same time, there is a hypocritical side to Venus in Virgo, and can talk about everything's supposed to be very moral and everything's supposed to be in order, but Venus in Virgo can be a hypocrite. But Venus in Virgo and prostitution actually is quite a reasonable link. And I suppose I'm using prostitution in the broader sense of the word, not necessarily the literal sense. But Venus in Virgo is about relating for money. It is very transactional. I suppose the prostitute is thinking about how they can benefit from a relationship. Every relationship has a price tag, and the feelings behind behind Venus and Virgo are secondary at best, and so that can be an issue with Venus and Virgo, just being a little too transactional there. Though Venus in Virgo is very precise, and precision can be useful in, for example, in terms of creating things, even being musical. I mean, I know music is supposed to be something where one sort of lets go and can allow one's feelings to express themselves, but music is precise. I got as a child, and I tried learning a guitar once. Absolutely hopeless. It's really difficult, isn't it? That was a long time ago. I had no sense of music. That was just me, but that was many, many decades ago. Really hopeless. But Venus in Virgo is precise, and I think very often for musicians they do have to be precise. It depends what kind of musician you are, but that might be one element of Venus in Virgo. And Venus in Virgo can also, in certain cases, have a sense of service. We should never forget that Virgo is a service sign. So that's a contradiction. You know, I've said that Venus in Virgo can be transactional, but perhaps at its sort of highest octave, Venus in Virgo is about service, is about relating to people from a perspective of some higher good. So that's perhaps the highest aspect of Venus in Virgo. Now, Venus in Virgo, how difficult Venus in Virgo may be, well, it could in theory depend on the horoscope, the wider horoscope. You know, with all of these things, you must never look at anything in isolation, and what you've just heard is just a load of generalizations, which have a high degree of subjectivity. But Venus does rule the earth signs by day, using the scheme, for example, of William Lilly in Christian astrology in the 17th century. So by day, Venus works better than by night. Venus is not peregrine by day. It has dignity by day, even though it's in Virgo, even though it's fallen in Virgo. By day, it possibly works better than by night, and I think that it may work particularly well when it is above the horizon, but the sun is below the horizon. So that would be because Venus is a nighttime planet, so it works best at night. And so when the sun is below the horizon, before dawn, after dusk, and the sun happens to be above the horizon, that's when Venus is really going to work well in Virgo. So those are a few theoretical thoughts about Venus in Virgo. And so now I want to just go through some charts. Some of these people I don't really know anything about, but one person is Martha Stewart, someone I particularly know very little about, but she has Venus in Virgo. Now, as I understand it, Martha Stewart has made her name through telling people how to cook, how to decorate, how to do things at home. I don't know, choosing tablecloths and whatever. I'm sure you might know far more about Martha Stewart than me. And I would have said that would be Venus in Virgo at its best level, one of its best levels. That's what Venus in Virgo is supposed to be doing. Venus in Virgo is about presentation. I suppose it's quite surface level, but it's about getting it right. And in her case, she's telling America how to get it right, or I don't know what she's doing now. I suppose she's born in 1941. So she's, in fact, this weekend is Martha Stewart's birthday. So I suppose we have to wish Martha Stewart a happy 83rd birthday. But still, I would have said that her Venus in Virgo is working relatively well, and it's a daytime chart, so it's not a peregrine Venus. It rules the earthy triplicity by day. And one thing about Martha Stewart, she did go to prison, and she went to prison because of, I think, insider dealing. She found out about some shares she owned in a way she shouldn't have found out about it, and she sold these shares. She didn't make a huge amount of money. It was a sum of money which for Martha Stewart was relatively trivial, so it was nothing she had to do. And that might be how Venus in Virgo might work. Venus in Virgo kicked in here. Venus in Virgo just focused on the money. Look, I've got these shares. I know they're going to go down, if I got the story right, so better sell them. You know, I think it was, I don't know, off the top of my head, it was something like $50,000. It was not a fortune, but she got her priorities wrong, and that might be how Venus in Virgo sometimes works. Just says, oh, shares going to lose $50,000 or whatever it was. Better sell these shares. So that Venus in Virgo, just thinking about the material details, but not actually thinking about the bigger picture. But overall, I would have said that from what little I know about Martha Stewart, her Venus in Virgo seems to be working quite well. Another person who seems to be using, she's dead now, who used Venus in Virgo pretty well was Diana Rigg, the actress Diana Rigg. And Venus in Virgo can be quite precise, and it can be a little bit harsh and critical. I think that she was known, well, if you look at her interviews, she's very critical and points things out. And I think that on set, was it on the set of what was the Bond film she was in called on Her Majesty's Secret Service, wasn't it, with when George Lazenby was James Bond, and I think she was constantly commenting on George Lazenby's acting skills and trying to be constructive, but that might be Venus in Virgo. And I suppose acting is something very precise, and she was a classically trained actress, and she took her craft very seriously. And Venus in Virgo is all about perhaps how you present yourself. And so that might be an effective way in which her Venus in Virgo was working. And yet another person who was able to use Venus in Virgo very well was J.K. Rowling, or is able to use use her Venus in Virgo well. So J.K. Rowling, we do not have a time of birth for J.K. Rowling, and her Venus is at 7 Virgo. So I suppose Venus in Virgo may just be, in one sense, just part of her Virgo complex. She seems to have a lot of planets in Virgo. She's got the Moon in Virgo. She's got Venus in Virgo. She's also got perhaps got Mercury in Virgo. So Venus in Virgo, I suppose, could be about creativity. And I mean, I suppose you normally associate writing with Mercury, but I suppose Venus may have a connection there. And her Venus in Virgo is on the Mercury Uranus and Mercury Uranus and Mercury Pluto midpoints. So okay, that may say something about the kind of relationship she's in and the kind of impact she has on people. And of course, the way she has, her public standing, she's become quite a controversial figure. I would have said quite a brave figure in terms of her views on women's rights and the impact of the transgender movement and so on. But so that Venus in Virgo is, but Venus in Virgo here is kind of sensible, and it's just focusing, I suppose, on the fact that if you want to write, you have to do it in quite a disciplined way. It's all about how to perhaps being successful by following a particular routine. So that's perhaps her Venus in Virgo. I don't feel particularly good about my description of J.K. Rowling. I don't think I really got to the heart of her Venus in Virgo, simply because I don't have a time of birth for her. Now, another person with Venus in Virgo, well, someone who has Venus in Virgo who is definitely the good, is Oscar Romero. So Oscar Romero was the Archbishop of San Salvador, and he spoke out against violence, he spoke out against poverty, and in 1974 he was 1980, in March 1980 he was gunned down while saying mass and by right-wing death squads, and eventually he got canonized. And so he has Venus in Virgo. And, maybe that Venus in Virgo for him changed over the course of his life. So from what I can understand, Oscar Romero started his career as a senior churchman as being actually quite conservative, as being, with a small c, uh, being quite traditional, the kind of person the Vatican quite liked, and the Vatican sort of promoted him, and he became Archbishop of San Salvador. But as he moved to the highest echelons of the church, he apparently changed. He became more focused on social issues. And that might be how Venus in Virgo was changing. Venus in Virgo might have just started to see everything in terms of presentation and making sure the Catholic Church is properly represented and being a good servant of the Catholic Church. And then at some stage, Venus in Virgo maybe change. I don't know a lot about Oscar Romero. I know the headline details, but so Venus in Virgo. Then we perhaps start to get to Venus in Virgo, which is the highest level of Venus in Virgo, which is service. And Venus in Virgo is humble. Realize it has a duty. It moves beyond superficial appearances. It is about being at the service of the people of El Salvador, and that's perhaps what killed him. Now, just while we're on the subject of Oscar Romero, I just want to show you the chart of his murder. So he was murdered while saying Mass on March 24th, 1980, and I think his Venus was being impacted at the time of his murder, and that may support the idea that his Venus in Virgo was about service and perhaps even sacrifice as well. So here is Archbishop Romero's horoscope in the middle, and there is his Venus, and you can see that at the time of his murder, so he had Venus at 21-22 Virgo, and at the time of his murder, Saturn was at 22-48 Virgo. So Saturn was going retrograde towards his Venus, and so perhaps that had a great deal to do with what was happening to him. And at the time of his murder, there was a Saturn-Neptune, a fairly close Saturn-Neptune square. So I do think that sort of supports the idea that his Venus in Virgo was very much an important part of who he was. I wonder, I suppose if you're this is just speculation, but if you are a Catholic priest, then your Venus may actually say something. I'm not a Catholic, but may say something about a projection, and it may be something to do with the Virgin Mary, and sort of a female supernatural force, maybe Venus in Virgo, and so maybe Venus, maybe that's perhaps how one might see Venus in Virgo in a Catholic priest at its highest level, about a relationship and thoughts about the Virgin Mary and her being an important person in the Catholic religion. I'm speculating here. Maybe you've got some ideas. I don't know. And so that's Oscar Romero. Another person who was gunned down with Venus in Virgo was John Lennon. And we don't really have an absolutely clear time of birth for John Lennon, but he had Venus in Virgo. Now, from what I understand with Venus in Virgo, I suppose can be a little bit cutting. And I think he was quite cutting in what he said. He used words quite powerfully. But Venus in Virgo might also be about musical application. That he was able to, he had a good sense of detail in perhaps terms of creating music and perhaps considering other styles of music, that they like, the Beatles like to play with different styles of music a great deal, and so perhaps that might be how Venus in Virgo is working. But to be a good musician, you probably have to have a good sense of detail. Okay, another person with Venus in Virgo would be Gavin Newsom, the governor of California. And there is his Venus in Virgo. He's got Moon in Capricorn, Venus in Virgo. You might say that someone with Moon in Capricorn, Venus in Virgo, both the feminine planets one is in its detriment, Moon is in its detriment, Venus is in its fall. So with that Venus in Virgo, you might say that his Venus in Virgo is just focused on the money, on the details. It's all about him. So there is someone who is strongly materialistic. However inspired and progressive and humanitarian he might sound, remember, this man has got Venus in Virgo and Moon in Capricorn, and I don't think he's an Oscar Romero kind of figure. His Venus is strong, though, because it's a nighttime chart. He was born before dawn, and Venus is above the horizon. It's it might not be in its opposite. Obviously, it's not in its triplicity. So in one sense, it's peregrine because it's above the horizon, but because it doesn't rule the earthly triplicity by night. On the other hand, you have got a nighttime planet above the horizon, a feminine planet in a feminine sign, and so in that sense it works quite well. So his Venus isn't totally disastrous, although it is in the 12th house. So I think with Gavin Newsom, I think I would probably interpret that Venus in Virgo as someone who is quite concerned about money and is what's good for Gavin Newsom. That's probably how I would see that. And looking at a few other people, well, okay, if we want to go for the ugly, I suppose there's Mohamed Atta. Again, don't have a time of birth for Mohamed Atta. So he was born on September the 1st, 1968. He was, of course, one of the leaders of the 9/11 attacks. And he has Venus in Virgo conjunct Mercury. So he's got a certain talent. He was an architectural student. He had very clear ideas about architecture and traditional ideas about architecture. And if you read about what he was interested in terms of architecture, you have a certain sympathy for him. It seemed to be his interests sounded quite useful. Not just going. I think he didn't like the sort of modern buildings. He wanted to do something more traditional, more in keeping with the style of the way things were. I think he was particularly thinking about architecture in Cairo. So that might have been his Mercury-Venus conjunction in Virgo. Yeah, that seems nice. Perhaps it's a shame that he got involved with Al Qaeda, but his Venus, remember this chart, he doesn't have any personal planets in water, so he certainly had issues in terms of relating, and that might be his Venus in Virgo. He had real issues with women. So when he was studying architecture in Germany, and at the end of when he was getting some diploma, and he was supposed to stand up and take the diploma from, I think, a woman at the institution, he couldn't shake her hand. He just couldn't do it because she was a woman, and that's maybe something about Venus in Virgo conjunct Uranus. There's some issue there that might be how Venus in Virgo was working for him, just being obsessed about particular details, and I think he led quite a strange life, and I think again one might see that with Venus in Virgo. And I suppose continuing on the theme of, well, I don't know about bad, but maybe not so nice, is Claudine Gay. Claudine Gay was the president of Harvard, who didn't say as much as she should have done about anti-Semitism on campus, but most importantly, I don't say most importantly, but as soon as she started to get a name for herself, not a negative name, regarding anti-Semitism, people researched her academic past, and they found she'd done a lot of plagiarizing. And here is someone with Venus in Virgo who does a lot of plagiarizing. I don't have a time of birth for her, and that kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Because Venus in Virgo would perhaps say, the means justify the end. Venus in Virgo, let's just look at the surface stuff. The important thing is I have the qualifications, I have the diplomas. The research, it's not the important thing. It's all about me and my career, and just being transactional about everything. And here she's transactional about her academic career. It's not about perhaps the research for the sake of a research, but it's more about getting the diploma, getting the recognition. So that might be how Venus in Virgo works. And then Venus is conjunct Pluto, perhaps becoming quite obsessive about it. Perhaps at an early age she became obsessed about the qualifications and the status, and that's perhaps how Venus in Virgo works. So just totally focusing on this superficial material level, but not really thinking about actually what she's doing and what it's actually about. Now, finally, I want to talk about two people. Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has got Venus in Virgo. I have to be careful what I say here. So, as I understand it, Kamala Harris, at the beginning of her career, she had a relationship with a man who was politically well connected, and he was considerably older than her. And as a result of this relationship, she was able to start to get her first elected offices. So, that may be how Venus in Virgo works. It could work, hypothetically. Venus in Virgo can see a relationship, perhaps a physical relationship, in terms of what it can yield. That is a possibility. I don't know exactly what happened. I don't know what was going through Kamala Harris's head when she was younger, but you can see that. You can see how that has perhaps made her open to criticism. And yes, she has Venus in Virgo. Perhaps with Venus in Virgo, she sees, in her case, Venus conjunct Pluto. Remember, Claudine Gay has had Venus in Virgo conjunct Pluto. Just seeing how all these connections can benefit her, and the ends always justify the means. And so she's perhaps been very good at creating connections, and fundamentally it may not be about her talent, and it's just about using the connections to just get herself as high up the ladder as she possibly can. And I think we're seeing the issue here. I mean, I don't know. Clearly, some people disagree with me. I suppose, a bit critical of Kamala Harris in my last video. I noticed 3 people unsubscribed, at least from what I can see from that video. I know it's not very many, but people did unsubscribe. It was a net loss in terms of subscriptions when I was talking about Kamala Harris. So clearly some people think she's great, but at least I assume some people feel she's great. I don't know, people unsubscribe for all sorts of reasons. So I have to be careful here. But yeah, with her Venus, I think there is something transactional about her. And through perhaps an ability to connect with people and to use people, she's been able to perhaps get to a level now where she's about to be president or could be president. And I think if you look at it objectively, she is a very poorly qualified candidate. I mean, she is a very weak candidate. Now, it's not just me saying it. I think it's obvious that she's a weak candidate. It's not about political. It's not about political. One's own political opinions. It's like with Claudine Gay. Claudine Gay, had to use plagiarism to advance up the academic ladder, and I think that Kamala Harris, well, she certainly seems to be using that Venus at some level. So I think she does illustrate how Venus in Virgo could actually be working. And finally, I'm going to look at the perennial favourite, Meghan. And I take the view that Meghan does reflect Venus in Virgo extremely well. Meghan is clearly, as far as I can see, someone who is very transactional, and she is thinking about how people can be useful to her at all levels, in my opinion. You may disagree with me. Venus in Virgo has an idea about relating. How can she snag a high-profile Briton? I mean, I believe, according to the story, is her first plan was to get involved. There was some British footballer, a soccer player who she was interested in. Maybe she thought she might have a relationship with him, but then she found out that she could get hold. She might be able to get hold of Harry. So that would be how Venus in Virgo works. And I'm sure Venus in Virgo, I would guess that in terms of her relationship with Harry, as she was getting close to him, I'm sure Venus in Virgo was working, was clicking away all the time, working out what was going on, how things, how this could benefit her, always perhaps at the most intimate moments, Venus in Virgo is always working away, working out how best she can leverage the situation to benefit herself. I mean, I know that's a bit harsh, but she has the added ability but she has Venus sextile Mars. It's not just Venus in Virgo; she's got Mars sextile that Venus. So going back to those intimate moments, I think that kind of connects, and you can imagine. You can speculate about what was going on at the beginning of her relationship with Harry, and how her mind and how her Venus in Virgo was actually working there. And she also has a reputation, I suppose, for ghosting people. That's Venus in Virgo. Venus in Virgo is thinking, is this person useful to me? And when they're no longer useful, they just go. So in a way, she's perhaps showing Venus in Virgo at its worst, or close to its worst. And, like Piers Morgan, I mean, I think she offended Piers Morgan because she ghosted him. She had as far as Piers Morgan was concerned, I think he met her for a drink and everything was fine. And then as soon as she linked up with Harry, she just cut him off. And of course, the way she cut off her father and I think her sister. So that's Venus in Virgo not being very nice, but that doesn't mean to say Venus in Virgo is not being effective with its Venus sextile Mars. There you go, probably lost a couple more subscribers there. Okay, so those are some thoughts on Venus in Virgo. And now I want to look at the week from the perspective of the I Ching. So I asked the question, what is the week starting on Monday going to be like for those watching the I Ching section of this video? And I will answer this question using 4 approaches. I will first start with a general approach. Then I will look at it from the perspective of money, then career, and then relationships. So, just a reminder, if you don't want your I Ching read, you don't have to have it read. What I say only applies to people who watch the I Ching segment of this video. So I'm not going to be talking about anything else this video. So if you don't want your I Ching done, you can stop watching the video now if you want, and you can watch something else. Okay, so here's a question. What's a week going to be like? For those watching the I Ching section of this video. And the first hexagram I got was hexagram 24, return. And it is the idea of going out and perhaps going out on a limb, taking a little bit of a risk, going as far as we can, and then reaching a certain point where we think that's enough, we've gone as far as we want to go, and then we come back. So for many of us, we may feel that it's time to come back this week. Perhaps we feel that it's time to return things to normal, that we've gone as far as we can, and we perhaps feel that we don't want to take any more risks, or we just want to be somewhere where we feel comfortable. And so if we're concerned, for example, also if we find ourselves concerned that something might be lost or missing, if that's the big concern coming into this reading, that something is missing, then there is a real possibility that it can come back. The Wilhelm translation of the I Ching talks about return after 7 days. So maybe over the course of a week you've lost something and you want it to come back. And then eventually it does come back. So that is a positive way of looking at return. Now, there is a moving line here. The third line from the bottom moves. And in the I Ching, the third line from the bottom, or rather the third line, is not particularly fortunate. So this third line moving is about indecision. We don't know what to do. Do we return? Do we not return? And we keep changing our mind. And so it's kind of fitting that we've got this hexagram of return, and when the week starts with Mercury going stationary retrograde. And in a way, that's perhaps what Mercury retrograde is all about. Things being on hold. There's just a lot of indecision. We're just not sure. Do we go back? Do we not go back? We can't make up our mind. And it's the indecision that may cause the problem. Now, the I Ching basically says that this is not too bad. It's not a big problem, this. The I Ching seems to advise us that if we can understand that we can't make up our mind, and if we can understand perhaps what we're doing wrong, then there's a real chance that we can return things to normal. So I don't think we should worry too much about this moving line, but there may come a point where we do have to be decisive. And probably if you've got this decision and you don't know what to do, the safest thing to do is to return. Do whatever. If you've got an indecision and you don't know what to do, then probably the best thing to do is to do whatever is safest and to return things to normal. As they say, to the status quo ante bellum, to the things before the chaos started, just return things to what they were to normal. That might be what one needs to do. And this hexagram, it does move, and it moves to hexagram 36, which is darkening of the light. Now that sounds a bit grim. It's not particularly grim. What this means is that we are returning perhaps to a position of short-term obscurity. So when things return to normal, we're in a situation where people aren't for a time really going to recognize us. They aren't really going to notice us. We perhaps actually feel that there's some part of ourselves that we actually need to hide, that there's no point in revealing it. We may even have secrets, things we don't want to discuss. And also, if we were to try to push ourselves over the week, to push out our message, we just might be ignored. And Greg Winkup, in his translation of the I Ching, he doesn't call it darkening of the light. He calls it the bright pheasant. And so the reason he calls it the bright pheasant is he's referring to the person asking a question. And he's saying that the person asking a question is magnificent, is like the bright pheasant. But the bright pheasant is being ignored. I mean, he sees that in terms of a minister at the court of the emperor, perhaps, who's got some wonderful things to say, got some really good advice to offer the emperor, but is being ignored. And that may be how it feels when we return. People are not going to be interested in what we have to say. They're not going to be interested in our advice, but it's okay because our advice is good and we just have to bide our time. So darkening of the light isn't necessarily as bad as it looks. Okay, so let's now look at things from the perspective of money. So in terms of money, we may be considering taking some kind of financial initiative, something we want to do with money. And perhaps we've started spending money on something, or we are really at the final stages before spending money on something. And we're starting to have second thoughts with return. And we may feel that it's time to reconsider the matter. We've perhaps gone as far as we can. Maybe we've spent a bit of money, and we may take the view that the first cut is the cheapest cut. Isn't that what they say with investment? If an investment is going wrong, very often cutting the investment early, you lose a bit of money, but if you wait too long, you lose more and more and more money, hence the first cut being the cheapest cut. And so that might be one way of looking at return. Just must make it clear I'm not giving any financial advice here. This channel is for entertainment purposes only. But it may be that just we feel that we just have to return things to normal. And if we're contemplating doing something with money, then maybe we should think again. And it could be a time return when we can ask for our money back. So if someone owes you money, ask for it back and be very clear about it. Or maybe you bought something and you don't want it anymore. Get a refund. And so if you want a refund, then now might be a very good time to do it. But we do have this third line from the bottom moving. And so with that third line from the bottom moving, there may be a certain indecision here. We're not sure. Should we be spending this money? Should we be asking for a refund? Should we be making this investment? Should we be making this commitment? And we just don't quite know what to do. And we keep changing our mind. And there is a certain amount of financial indecision. So there may be one aspect of your finances where you just don't know what to do. And you keep changing your mind. And, I'm not going to tell you what to do, but probably the thing to do is to do whatever is most sensible and perhaps err on the side of caution. Now, this hexagram, it does move to the darkening of the light. And I think that from a financial perspective, firstly, it is not a good, as you move towards the end of the week, it's not going to be a good idea to talk about money. If you try, and if you certainly not to talk about your own money, be quite secretive about it. And if you've got financial advice to offer, even if it's very good financial advice, I think it is quite possible that your advice will be ignored. And I suppose there's also a sense of consolidation. You can see darkening of the light. You can see that the times you're living in are not fortunate, not necessarily on a personal level, but money is going to be tighter. I mean, I suppose, we've just had, in the United States last Friday, we had non-farm payrolls, and people are now starting, which not as many jobs were created as had been thought, and there's a sort of sign of recession is on the way. People are starting to take it more seriously. And so recession affects all of us. It's not just banks and financial institutions. It filters through society. And so perhaps, we do have a recognition here that money is not going to be so available as it was in the past. And so darkening of the light might be about advice about how to deal with the future, how to deal with what is coming up. And darkening of the light maybe just to be about conserving our resources, and this might be a good thing to do. And perhaps some of our more ambitious financial plans and ideas perhaps need to be curtailed, cut back, or perhaps even cancelled. So that's money. So let's now look at things from a perspective of career and business. So with career and business, you're feeling that you'd like to go back to something, or maybe you've taken a little bit of a risk, or maybe you've tried something out and you're seeing how it works, and perhaps you're understanding the limits of the situation. Perhaps you're even understanding your own limits. If you're working, of course, this section only really applies if you have a job or a business. But just a sense that things have gone as far as they can get to, and now it is time to come back and sort of scale something down. Though it may be in certain cases you could, if you've left a job and you want to go back to a job, if you've left a job and you have an opportunity to go back to that same job, then that actually does seem to be something that can happen if that's on your mind, and that actually might be quite a useful thing to do. But still, there is a lot of indecision here. Perhaps if you've got some, maybe also you've been thinking, if you run your own business, perhaps you've been thinking about expanding your business, and you're now starting to have second thoughts, remembering what I've just said about the non-farm payrolls and the possibility of a recession is increasing. So there may be doubts about business expansion here. And I'm not telling you what to do. I can't tell you what to do. But you need to perhaps need to consider it more carefully. And you might feel that the best thing to do is to just hold back, review the situation, and just return. So that's one way in which return could actually work. Although return could be more optimistic. So, for example, if you run your own business and you feel you've lost some business, or you've lost a client and you haven't been able to get in touch with the client, then there's a possibility here that there could be a return. The I Ching literally says after 7 days, but I don't know, maybe it's going to be a few weeks, when Mercury goes direct at the end of a month. So that is a possibility. But there is this real indecision here, and because the third line is moving. And so there might be just a certain sense about what should you be doing in terms of business or getting a job or your existing job. And indecision is not actually a very good thing, because an indecision could just completely hold you up and could hold you back and just prevent you from getting anywhere. And anyway, this hexagram return, it does move, and it moves to darkening of the light. Now, darkening of the light, remember that Greg Wincup, when he was talking about darkening of the light, talked about the bright pheasant, and talking about someone whose advice was being ignored, someone who has good advice and it's being ignored. So if you're working in a hierarchical sense, you're working for an employer, You might have plenty to say about the way the business should be run, but I don't think your advice is going to be taken seriously. So if you're in any position where your job is to give advice or to give recommendations, your understanding of the situation is going to be very good, but I don't think that you'll be listened to. You'll be like the bright pheasant, and you perhaps just have to accept that that is the way it is. And so I suppose this also means that, if you're applying for a job, darkening of the light this week, it just may be very difficult to express to another person or a potential employer, or if you're looking for business, you're trying to get a contract, for example, it just may be very difficult for people to actually understand your true worth. And so that could be a little bit disappointing. But it's, this hexagram is only, this I Ching reading is only for a week. And if you're in a job, darkening of the light, I suppose it's just about keeping yourself to yourself. There's nothing that can be revealed. You might feel there's something to be revealed, but just do what's in front of you. And I suppose just bide your time. And finally, there is relationships. So if we've got return, one simple way in which return could manifest is that maybe a relationship will be rekindled, because you're talking about return, going back to something, perhaps going back to someone. So if someone has just disappeared, it's a good chance that they're going to come back. And I suppose that fits with the fact that this week, Mercury goes stationary retrograde in Virgo, and then it's going to go back into Leo. So that's perhaps the idea of someone returning, someone perhaps coming back into your life. So that is one way of looking at it. Another way of looking at it is that perhaps you've started a relationship, or a relationship has, relationship could be about anything, not just romance. The relationship has moved in as far as it can go, and you've perhaps realized that it's gone as far as it can go, and you want to withdraw from the situation, you want to pull back. And so we then get this sense of return to normality, and perhaps recognizing that someone is not what you thought they were, and maybe you want to end or curtail a relationship, or de-escalate, de-intensify a relationship. So that might be how return is working. But still, there is a certain amount of indecision here because of this third line. You're not quite sure, you don't seem to be quite sure what to do about a particular relationship. Do you go back? Do you not go back? Do you take things further, or do you just call a halt to the whole thing? So this uncertainty, I think, is connected with Mercury going stationary retrograde on Monday, and you can feel that indecision. And there's no right answer to what you should do, but maybe you just need to make a short-term decision. I suppose Mercury goes direct at the end of August, so maybe between now and the end of August you should just make a decision and stick to it, at least for the next few weeks, and not feel that you have to make a commitment either way. But there might also be a situation in which you just have to do whatever is most sensible. But what you don't want to do is sit on the fence. I think you do have to make a choice with relationships. Sitting on the fence just may not be an option, because that will just make things more complicated. And this hexagram return does move. It does move to the darkening of the light. And I just think, in a general sense, darkening of the light is suggesting that things need to just calm down a bit in terms of relationships. If you're not in a relationship, that's the way it is, that's fine. don't feel that you're going to be taken especially seriously by anyone. However wonderful a person you are, remember Wynkoop talking about the bright pheasant, you might be the bright pheasant. There's every reason why you should be taken notice of. There's every reason why people should think you're wonderful, but it's just not happening. The darkening of the light, and it's a temporary situation. It's remember, this is a hexagram. This I Ching reading is for the week, so perhaps you just need to accept the way things are. Accept that you're not going to get as much appreciation as you actually would like, and it just may be a time to, I don't know, restore yourself without having to worry too much about other people. Perhaps it's just a question of take it or leave it. If people are not interested in what you've got to do, what you've got to say, they're not interested in you. It's just for the week, darkening of the light. Next week is obviously completely different, and that's it. That is my I Ching forecast, and that is my view of this week. I hope you found this video of some use. If you did enjoy this video or found it useful, I would be very grateful if you were to like it. If you're not subscribed, of course, I'd be super grateful if you were to subscribe. And if you want to buy me a coffee, there is a link in the description. So thank you very much for listening, and I will talk to you again very soon.